I'll give you just the highlights of Nyla's abbreviated biography, as she's very accomplished. Nayla is a coach, consultant, facilitator, professor, and researcher, helping humans do their greatest work in the world. Nayla brings a research-based, heart-led approach to her practice of helping people and organizations develop leadership capability, promote career growth and satisfaction, improve employee and community engagement, and establish learning communities. Her clients are business and nonprofit leaders, university deans and faculty, and entrepreneurs across all industry levels. Nayla was a longtime dean of students at Columbia Business School, where she coached, taught, and advised thousands of students, and co-founded the Leadership Lab, the clearinghouse for leadership activities for MBA students. Subsequently, Nayla worked in corporate talent and organization development in the healthcare industry, coaching executives and other leaders, developing and delivering curriculum, and leading innovation in human capital. Nayla researches people who have been impacted by layoffs and is a frequent podcast contributor on how people can navigate and underemployment. She teaches at the graduate level at Columbia University. Nayla is involved with various women's leadership organizations, including the Athena Center at Barnard College, and I'm going to mess this up, the Quorum Initiative. She also co-hosts the podcast Inside Job, thepodcast.com, and she graduated from Smith College and the University of Pennsylvania and has a doctorate in adult learning and leadership from Columbia University. She is a member of the International Coaching Federation. So, that's
ridiculous. It's so, like, these bios are so nuts.
No, it's right. Incredible. So, thank you so much for being here, Nayla. We want to jump right in. We know that the world has drastically changed because of COVID. And I know I see a lot of seniors on the call today. And a lot of the juniors and seniors I've been speaking to, are saying, where are the lists? What companies are hiring? And while those lists certainly exist, I think from what would be most helpful is hearing about your research that focuses on behavior change during these difficult times and sort of the inner work that needs to be done during an unpredictable job market. So to begin, if you could tell us a little bit about how to build career resilience, and what does career resilience mean or look like for a senior who's about to graduate?
Okay. So maybe I'll take us one step back and talk a little bit about how I come to this work and what it, who I am and how it kind of equips me to do this. So you've heard all the formal stuff. So spent most of my life working in business education, right? Working with MBA students. After Smith, I did a couple random jobs and then went back to school, got a master's in higher ed, went into higher ed and worked in a business school. And one of the things that did for me is give me this platform for almost 20 years where I could watch how students responded during all the different markets, right? So if I'm in New York City through the tech bubble of the early 2000s, through 9/11, through the recession of 2007, 2009. What we're doing now, I'm still quite affiliated with Columbia. I teach at the School of Public Health. I teach at the B School. I teach at Teachers College. I do a lot of career work at all those places. All of that was happening. I ended up deciding to do my research for my dissertation around layoff. And I was really interested in why some people, and it came from having observed those students for so many years. Like, why was I seeing students come through good markets, bad markets, personal difficulties, divorce, death in the family, personal illness. And I would see some students come back from that really capable and empowered and moving forward. And some people would be flattened by the experience of having something bad happen to them. That led me to my research. And for the purposes of designing a doctoral study, you have to be pretty precise. I ended up looking at people who'd been impacted by layoff in the last big recession that we had, 2007 to 2009, and really I do qualitative research. So what I do is dig really deep into people's stories to understand the patterns of meaning making and their lives. And I was spending all this time over the course of 3 or 4 years. So at this point, it was several years after the recession. So people were largely back to work if they were capable of getting back to work. And I was spending a lot of time understanding their stories. And what I was trying to understand is what made them so resilient. Why did some people come out of that doing really well? And by doing well, I don't mean that they got a great high paying job, but that they were back to appropriate work, meaning they were using their expertise to do something that was meaningful in the world, that they were delighted by, where they were being compensated appropriately. And more importantly, they'd regained a sense of agency over their jobs. Like having, you guys have probably never ever been laid off. I've been laid off, right? Because you have the sense that like the world has been yanked out from under you, not unlike what's happening with COVID, not unlike the sense that like, wait a second, I did all these things I was supposed to do. I went to the right schools, I took the right major, I had the right internships, and like, how come work like isn't turning out perfect for me? What I was curious to know is how people regained their sense of agency and control. That's resilience to me, is to be able to bounce back, to be able to carve a path forward, even when the factors around you feel uncertain and they feel like less than ideal. And what I found, thankfully, is that this has a lot less to do with your nature and your personal happiness set point or your natural resilience set point, which is there's lots of really interesting research on set points, but it has a lot more to do with behavior, right? Choices that you get to make about things that you do to keep you moving forward when work has been disrupted. And I think a lot of those findings are really relevant now. So I'm doing a lot of teaching and coaching and talking about those behaviors, even when you're very early in career, even when COVID looks so different than the recession did 10 or 12 years ago. We have so little information and so little real understanding of what this is going to mean for the economy and what this means for employers. And I hope you guys, I'm sure, are hearing that message, and I hope you believe it when we say, like, we don't really know what the future holds, but we still can play with these behaviors that build our capacity for resilience. So that's what I hope we can talk about today. The way I break down, the simplest form, the way I break down the behaviors is into two bodies of work. I call some of them inner work and some of them are outer work. And what I found in my research, and what I continue to find with my clients, with my students, and with my ongoing research, is that people who are successfully and systematically moving through the cycle of both inner and outer work are having the best outcomes. So what do I mean by those things? So I think about data a lot, and I think about your life as a source of data, and I think about all the experiences you have as sources of data. I think about the people you get to meet, companies you get to interact with as sources of data. The inner work is the process of understanding and exploring and analyzing and deriving insights from your personal data set. And outer work is about systematically, strategically, and deliberately collecting new forms of data and bringing them into your meaning-making process. Right. And so I picture it like a wheel, and anyone who's studied anything around learning systems or how kids learn, how adults learn, we're always talking about cycles, right? Like, how do you try something, get new information, integrate the information, try again? It's a similar concept. When I talk about inner work, one of the findings that, I don't think this is one of the findings that surprised me, but one of the findings I love to talk about is that people who have really good outcomes after career pain, career trauma, whether it's layoffs, like crappy boss, whatever you want to call it, are doing a systematic, regular form of reflection. For me, the most available is the pen and paper and journaling and tracking your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, your experiences, like ideas that capture your attention, the thing you can't stop watching on Netflix, the news you're always drawn to, why it is that Patty makes you feel so safe and comfortable and able to explore your real career desires. Really spending the time to understand why you feel the way you feel, why you think the way you think, how various experiences in your life are shaping your career interests and your career desires. This might be really intuitive for some people. Like, I was a journaler my whole childhood. I probably stopped journaling when I had kids because I didn't have time. And I was watching these people I was studying really engage in this process, largely out of desperation, right? After many years of being like, why can't I figure out how to get happy at work? Why can't I get back on my feet? They start praying, they start meditating, they start running, or they start writing. And suddenly it unlocks, oh, that's why. There's an insight, there's been a pattern in my history that I just have been ignoring. They were all doing this, and I was like, oh my God, I got to get my pen and paper back. And I've been journaling pretty consistently since I did the research, and I tell everyone to do it. That's what works for me. Some people meditate. I'm not that great at that. Some people run. I'm not good at that. They do something that creates a system, a rhythm where they can separate their thoughts from their reaction to their thoughts. You guys are, I think, really fortunate to come of age in an era where mindfulness practice, all this stuff's really available. It's something we talk about in the lexicon. It was not that way 25 years ago when I was at Smith. So I'm really happy for you guys, and I really encourage you to have that practice. That's one form of inner work. It's the idea of being aware of your own interests in a meaningful way, being aware of how experiences that you have shape your interests, influence your interests in a meaningful way. Another practice that was really, this was a big surprise to me in my research, but it's something that I consider inner work, is the idea of investing in yourself outside of work, doing something that you love, that is good for you, that makes you feel restored in a meaningful way, that has nothing to do with your chosen field. So that might be something in the arts. If you're not an artist, it might be cooking, it might be exercise, it might be learning Italian. I was really surprised to find that the people who were underemployed or unemployed or a long, long search were using these practices to kind of deepen their stamina to go back into it's a marathon, not a sprint, especially now. And I think the instinct, especially for hardworking A students like yourselves, is to just work harder. It's like, if I don't have a job, is just to like make more Excel spreadsheets and spend more time on LinkedIn and just work harder, which is probably how you got where you are in life. The big surprise for me in my research was that people who were making structured time to do things outside of looking for a job had the stamina to keep looking for a job. So whatever it is that you love to do it. Build the time to engage in your activities of choice. It right sizes the role of work in your life, which is a good habit for when you get into work. And it gives you that stamina that you need. So that's what I mean by inner work. Patty, any questions or thoughts on that before I keep going?
I just want to say that the stamina part, I think, and doing things outside of work. So, two thoughts. I mean, one, when I was laid off after 9/11, a long time ago in Manhattan, I started playing a lot of tennis in Central Park for fun, but it was so much more beneficial to play tennis because I was meeting so many people who I connected with for a job versus being in my apartment, just searching for a job and stressing out, right?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I think it built a great narrative to explain. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, right? You guys are going to graduate, many of you, in a couple of weeks, or maybe is it next week? It might be next week, right? And it might be 3, 4, 5, 6 months till you're really deep into an interview process with an employer. I want to know how you spent the time, right? You sitting behind your laptop for the entire summer, sweating for 50 hours a week is not a great story about how you spend your time. You learning a new skill, you helping your community, you engaging in a field of study that's for pleasure, to show me that you're a curious, interested person. Like, I'm super into the Renaissance. There's no way I'm making a living doing anything around the Renaissance, but I'm really into it. And you know what? You'd be surprised at how I get to talk about it in interviews, meeting clients for prospective work. It's part of what makes me a rich, interesting person to talk to. I want you to be rich, interesting people to talk to. So Patty, to your point, you meet people and you have a story to tell.
One other comment that I kind of curious about. I took a job shortly thereafter at Pottery Barn, and I thought I was a smithy, and maybe I had this feeling of like, this isn't what I want to do, right? But it turned out to be a great, awesome experience. I loved working there, and I met some great people. And I actually found, through working at Pottery Barn, I had some informational interviews that came from.
I love it.
So what do you say to people who are thinking, is it okay to just get a job because it's a job?
Yeah, I love that question. I think, listen, we all have practical needs as well as our long-term career goals, right? And practical needs include having money in our pockets, and I don't know if that's going to mean paying rent for yourself, having health insurance, all those things really matter. I think that, yes, you're right, Patty, like both of those cases you gave, the tennis and the Pottery Barn, one of the things it did for you is unlock networks that are sometimes right in front of our faces that we don't think of, right? Because we align with our lookalikes largely, like people who went to our colleges, people who went to our high schools, people who study what I study, people I met my JYA. Like, you got to think beyond that. The other thing is that I'm a big believer, and I've learned this from my research and from my coaching. Just this morning, I was talking with a client about this. The idea of job crafting, the idea of building your personal course of study. What is it that you want to know how to do in the world, right? I was an English and French major. Another day, we'll talk about how it makes total sense to me that I do what I do, given that I was an English major. It's not obvious to most people, but somewhere in there, there's a storyline. The other thing, but the reason I say that is because we all have a vision of what we're going to do with the thing that we studied or that we have devoted our thinking to for the last few years. And I want to encourage you to broaden your field of study, your personal course, your personal curriculum, because what you also learn when you are doing a job at Pottery Barn is how to engage with customers, how to think about design in a way that even if, listen, Patty's a career coach, right? But the principles of design are what we talk about when we talk about designing a career or designing a life, right? How do you take in a lot of information? How do you make choices and trade-offs? How do you break a project down one piece at a time? Whatever it is that you end up doing to put money in your pocket can be part of your course of study if you're purposeful about designing work that is influential and meaningful for the long run. The example I'll give you this morning, I was on a phone call with a client who's based in California. She works for one of the large social media companies. She really prefers client-facing work. She's not in a client-facing role. She's like she's in a sales organization, several layers away from the client, like deep in the data. And she has the opportunity today to meet with her manager's manager in the context of they're probably facing layoffs. They're probably, she may be furloughed. And she's like, I, on one breath, want to share that I don't know that I'm in the right role, but also don't want to jeopardize my job. And we've developed a message around, okay, how does the thing you're doing now, even if it's not your life's work, add to your overall career portfolio? How do you think about it being additive to your long-term plan? And so whether it's a job, so in her case, if she wants to be client facing, in the future, she's going to have to use those guys in the back of the shop who do all the data crunching. And she's more prepared, more equipped, has a deeper understanding of what they do than she would have had she only ever been in a client facing role, direct client facing role. Same thing with Patty. If you deconstruct your work history, it's your job to come up with a storyline about how every experience shapes your overall skill set, your overall portfolio. And this is something I see in the people who I study who are laid off, who succeed. They are able to create the narrative of how every experience, whether it's teaching in a classroom, which a number of people I studied did as a last resort, or it's taking on temporary work, contracts or consulting gigs. It's your job to build the storyline and to design a course of study, learn about customers, learn about being in a service industry, learn about working for a nonprofit, learn about fundraising, whatever it is, start thinking about those experiences as additive to your total portfolio. That this concept of job crafting, you can Google it. It's a really interesting way of making meaning of things that might seem temporary. Right. So when I talk about outer work, this is some of the outer work we're doing is picking up projects, picking up experiences, even if they don't meet our definition of ideal at the moment, and thinking about how they could serve us in the long run. And I say this like with a lot of empathy, having come from Smith and spent, my life thinking like I was destined for academic greatness, and then having, for me, made a decision pretty early that I was not going to pursue an academic life. Having to kind of like rewrite the narrative, rewrite the story so that the work I was picking up along the way made sense for the long road. The other really important message around outer work that I want to share with you is twofold. The first is around networks and making sure that you're using this time to network strategically. It is a great time to network. People are home, people are really uncertain, and people are hungry for connection. Before you walk into any networking conversation, of course, I'm sure the center is preparing you with your narrative and your ask, as well as your offer. And I say this as someone who should have been at my 25-year reunion this spring. I'm really curious to know what's on the minds of 18 to 21-year-olds right now. I'm interested to know what college students are thinking about in terms of COVID and in terms of like life when COVID's not the dominant storyline in our lives. I just want to know, what are young people into from a social perspective, from a technical perspective? Like, what are the things that move you and inspire you? What are things you worry about? There's a lot of us out here who don't recognize how old we've gotten and still think that we are in our 20s, and really need to hear from you guys about what's moving you. And that's your offer. This is what's on the hearts and minds of people who study what I study, who went to Smith, who are women in this time. Like, we want to know. And being really purposeful about your ask of people. Like, when you're networking, it's not one size fits all in terms of your questions. And this is something I've learned over the years of studying people who've been laid off. They use their networks very intelligently to not only create opportunities and uncover opportunities, but to gain more insight about themselves. So think about that. The last thing I want to say is that I'm a big believer in experiments. And something I learned from the people I studied who recovered well from layoff was that they were designing and running experiments all the time. The experiment might look like, I'm going to take a 2-month gig at Pottery Barn and see if it teaches me something about retail. But being purposeful with the research question, right? If you're going to take a job because you need to have cash, design some research questions that are going to help you have a deeper understanding of your plan in the long run. Do I like retail? Do I like being customer facing? Do I like being on a team of people? Do I like leading teams of people? Do I like the freedom of a freelance schedule, or do I really do better in an organization where there's structure? Everything is data, right? We are always looking to answer good questions. In this time, I'm saying to people with such an uncertain landscape, not only do I want you running experiments, I want you making work. What that means to me is that you are codifying what you know how to do in the world, right? So whether you're 21 and have never had a full-time job, or whether you're 46 and have worked for 25 years, you know how to do things. And I wrote an article on this on Medium. You can look it up pretty easily. What I'm seeing people do right now is make work, and I'm pushing everyone to make work. Create the experiments, write down what you know how to do, right? Make a playbook. Most of you guys have had some kind of summer experience of something, you worked somewhere, you volunteered somewhere. Imagine yourself designing an orientation program for the people who come after you. Codify that, write that down, create a course plan and outline. You have comments on what it's like to be graduating senior in the era of COVID. Write a LinkedIn post. Tell us what it's like to be you. And for a couple of reasons. One, it keeps you sharp. It keeps you analyzing and bringing in data and being decisive about what you understand. It helps build a storyline for how you spend your time. It gives you content to bring to interviews and to networking conversations. It helps to build your network. And it builds self-efficacy, which is the sense that we have that we can start a project and end a project when structure goes away. If you guys are a few weeks away from graduation and suddenly you're going to have volumes of time on your hands, one of the things that people who are unemployed have to do is figure out how to structure a week. What does the beginning of this week look like? What is a goal for me for the week? And how do I know I'm making progress along that goal? And that builds self-efficacy, which is the sense that we can get things done and do things and get better at things. So I'm going to stop there, Patty.
Yeah,
I feel like I just talked for 30 minutes straight.
This is great.
I'm curious about what questions you have. We are a small group. I don't mind, Jason, if they talk to me. What's on your minds? How can I be the most helpful right now?
So feel free to take yourself off mute. Let me know if you can't do that, and I can unmute you. You could just.
Can I add one? Yeah, I'll just say, because one of the questions you had is like, how can you guys keep accountable during this time? And so I mentioned the idea of giving yourself a course of study, giving yourself homework, giving yourself projects. I also think each other is like the best asset you have, is building pick an accountability buddy, whether it's your roommate or a housemate or somebody who is in your major, somebody who you can just set goals with week by week and get on the phone or on Zoom and figure out how you're doing.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, I can take them off. I'll take you off mute, Yvonne, if I'm saying your name correctly. Let's see. Go ahead. I think we can hear you.
Okay, so hi, I'm Yvonne. I'm a senior, majored in data science and minored in psychology. I think my question right now is like, for COVID, I
Sorry, can everyone mute again, because I can't hear.
Yeah, if you're not talking, Yvonne, I'm sorry, you data science and psychology, you said?
Yes. So I think my problem is like I had a plan and it's like more problematic because your plan got canceled or like
right.
It's influenced. So my plan was to go to a master's degree, a graduate degree, and I got a couple of schools lined up, but now like I'm second guessing it and I'm considering landing a job because of, a lot of reasons. And also what you said, like self-reflecting, because we get a lot of that after March, like you have a lower volume of work and I'm rethinking decisions. And sometimes I question, is it because I'm rethinking too much that I'm questioning it now, or it's because it was not enough thinking in the beginning? You know, it was
Yeah.
a lot of not sure what is the right answer, while you know there might not be a right one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is your question how to begin thinking about this?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you said something really important, which is that there is not a right answer. I think that is something I say both personally, having been out in the field for 25 years, and I say having taught, I don't even know how many students over the last 20 years. I don't think about years at a time, like, or like, my 10-year plan anymore. I think about like 12, 14, 16, 18 months at a time. And what I like to do is select and guide people towards selecting 1 or 2, maybe 3 potential courses of action, and figuring out what I would need to know in order to progress one of those pathways. So sometimes I draw pictures on my notebook, because I'm a journaler, with like roads. Like if I'm at a fork in the road and there's one fork that says, or one prong that says, go to finish school, right? Like go ahead, do your master's, even if it's online, we'll figure it out. We'll try. What would I need to know in order to progress that? What is even imperfect action I can take to move that decision a little further down? And then I might make another fork in your case, which is like, maybe I should pursue a job where I could gain more experience or build networks in a part of the world or with a set of companies in an industry. What would I need to know? Who would I need to talk to? And again, I'm a researcher. I think like a researcher. I think like all the time, what is the next question that I have a working hypothesis about that I either want to validate or disprove, right? So the question might be, if I take a year to work rather than going to school, would that derail me substantially? Or can I go back to school fairly easily in the long run? Who would I need to talk to? What would I need to gather in terms of data to advance that? Like think of it like a game, like a board game, to advance that piece along that thinking. I have a lot of empathy for you guys because there's so much we don't know. Like I have no idea what colleges and grad schools are going to look like in the fall. I don't know if we're going to be doing everything virtually or if we're going to be in person. I like to break things down into manageable, digestible chunks. Like what can you figure out this week to help advance? If those are the 2 forks or 2 prongs on your fork, should I continue thinking about grad school? Should I think about getting a job for a year, 18 months? Who do you need to talk to? What kind of new information would help you make a more informed choice to advance a little bit in your thinking? I also think we have to get comfortable with not knowing. I mean, that's a part of the capacity of building resilience is, and again, this is developmentally, I don't expect a senior in college to necessarily have this yet. This comes with, I think, having kids, working for 20 something years, doing a lot of things wrong, getting laid off, having all those experiences. The idea that we can totally control, even if we play all of our cards right, the outcome, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. We can make really good decisions with really good information at a moment in time. And that's what you can do. So draw yourself a board game and put some potential pathways, and just ask yourself, what would I need to know to want to go further down this path, and see who you can leverage to figure it out. That's what I would tell you if you're a student or a client. Yeah. Can I read this question? Imperfect action. Thanks, Patty. I'm all about imperfect action. I'm not a senior student, but I've been laid off work, and I'm trying to think about how to spend my summer productively while searching for another job. Can you expand on the making work? Yeah. So here's what I think the idea of making work looks different to different people, right? It depends if your driving engine is around bringing cash into the house. Like that is a real thing for a lot of people I work with. I would think about what you know how to do. And that might be, listen, you guys are college seniors or juniors, or at least deep into college, and there's lots of kids around who are homeschooling right now, right? And lots of parents like me who are going insane trying to manage a job and, homeschool our kids. So I would think about what is it that you can do, how to do, right? You know how to be a student, something about your subject matter. Think about teaching. It's always an option. I see a lot of clients who are out of work do this. It could be anything from spin to French to homework strategies, to swimming for that matter, when we're able to get back outdoors. I think making work also looks like identifying, like, what is the here's a question I like to ask people. What is the thing, a problem in the world that you see people making moves on where you're like, oh, you're doing that wrong, right? Like you're forgetting this, write about it, right? Right now, everyone's on social media all the time. There's so much content. Some of it's really, really good. So what's your contribution to the problems, the aches you see in the world? right? And I teach at the School of Public Health, right? You can imagine those guys have a lot to say right now, both about what's going right and what's going wrong. So we're writing like crazy, right? Publishing on LinkedIn, publishing on other social media platforms, publishing on Medium, just even codifying it. So when they get to an interview, so making work is not always for public consumption. Making work is sometimes for your personal course of study to say, I've been observing this for a long period of time. And when I finally get in front of the person who could hire me, I want to have a point of view on what I would do differently. You got to do that work. Don't wait to be spontaneous in an interview. Codify it. Does that help? I don't know where she is, the person who made that comment, but hopefully. Other questions? Or Patty or Jason, any other responses, ideas?
I have a question for you, actually, just about your journaling practice. Do you do kind of like if you're willing to share mechanics of that, like,
sure.
Do you have prompts that you use? Do you do morning pages, brain dump?
I do morning pages.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So Julia Cameron is a screenwriter, wrote a very well-known book, which is probably now, I don't know, maybe 20 years old, called The Artist's Way. She has an exercise she calls morning pages. I don't know, Patty, if you want to throw it in the notes, or Jason want to throw it in the notes. It's where I start most of my clients off, because for some of us who are not natural born journalers, it's like overwhelming. But she has a principle where every morning, for me, I have to be honest, sometimes in the afternoon, you write 3 handwritten pages unedited. And in her purest form, you never even look at them again. The idea is just to unlock the inner critic, that kind of like nasty girl who lives in your mind, who tells you you're not good enough and you're doing it wrong, is to get in the habit of just shutting her up and just unlocking your ideas, your thoughts, your values, your experiences. I do provide, like for my clients, I provide like journaling prompts almost every week when we're working together. And I would bet you guys have, worksheets or ideas in the Career Center that would help you just, and sometimes it's simple, like a question I like to ask people is like, why do people call me for advice? And just to write about that, when my friends ping me and say, hey, can you talk for 5 minutes? What are they looking for? Right. And that starts to tell you what your skills are, what you're great at, that you might be not seeing, but that other people are aware of. What is work worth doing is another question I ask people all the time. Like, what's worth it to you to get up in the morning and fight through the sleep and get up and sit at your desk? What's worth doing for you? I think you guys could be continuing to do work around your values, around your key experiences. I want you all to be able to go into the marketplace talking about experiences, not just because you loved them, but what they taught you, what it showed you about yourself, all that kind of stuff. How would you suggest seniors expand their networks during this time when you can't go into the community? First of all, I'd start, and I think about networks like rings of a tree. So I'd start with your personal board of directors, like who those people are, who are your advisors in life. It's probably your best friends, maybe your parents, maybe, friends from childhood. Figure out what you want to know and figure out who they know, right? So if your question is, what is it like to go to grad school in such an uncertain economy? If your question is, should I start my own business? Figure out who your people who are already on your side, who are already your advocates, who do they know, who can help you advance your information around particular research questions. It could be like, who do we know who works at Facebook? I mean, it could be anything. But whatever the question is, know the question, then start with your immediate ring. You guys are full-time students. If there are people at Smith you do not know, but you've had 2 classes with them and you've always been curious about them, this is the time. Like I always say, if you are a full-time student, you are in the best place ever to meet people. And again, figure out who they know. Your faculty, your administrators, like your friends of the house, as we call them, like the people who are in your orbit, people you admire, right? So reach out to people who you have visited a class or you met through a summer internship, or your parents' friends who has a cool job or made a big career pivot or somehow figured out how to live on a farm in New Hampshire and you're always wondered what that was like. Think about the people you know and think about the research question. I'm finding that look at I should be on LinkedIn with all of you guys by the end of this conversation, right? All you gotta say is in the like, hey, we met at this webinar today. Figure out who I know, use your Smith network. I cannot tell you how powerful it is. Spend time on LinkedIn. Look at people who I know, people who Patty knows, people who Jason, this is how we especially now, we are in mindset of service and connection, let's do it. But you got to know what your story is. You got to know what you're trying to figure out. Like just meeting a lot of people is not important. Knowing what you want to understand about their industry, their role, their career is really important. So like, I don't love the can I pick your brain type of conversations. But if someone says, I want to know what made you decide to go get your doctorate in your 40s, I'll have that conversation with you. I want to know what it's like to think about a full-time career in higher education, why you left for corporate. I'll have that conversation. I want to know how you manage having kids and a career or starting your own business. That's purposeful. Just being like, I want to pick your brain, I'm probably not going to respond to you. Honestly, I'm sorry, Patty.
Love the honesty. No, it's good stuff.
What I mean by making your offer, this is part of knowing what you're good at. Like one of the things I find in my research is people who bounce back from layoff, they know how to, what I could do, I call it claiming your value. You know your contribution to the world of work. You know your storyline, right? So I don't expect you guys at 21 or whatever you are to have the same level of contribution that someone who's been working for 15 years does, but you know things I don't know. You know what's happening in the field that you study right now. You know what it was like to be a junior studying abroad in Peru last year. You know what it's like to work in a research lab at Smith. You know what it's like, you have all these stories that I don't know about. Your offer is the thing that you are prepared to talk about based on your experiences and your expertise, right? And you have something to offer. So you just need to be prepared. So when I say to you, like, tell me what you're interested in, you can answer the question. You can say with an informed, I took these 3 classes with this particular instructor at Smith, and she does research in this area, and I've been really compelled by that. So I did a little reading on this, and that's how I'm governing my search, by looking deeper into that question. That's what I mean by knowing your offer.
I know I should have scheduled this for an hour versus 45 minutes.
That's okay.
So we have approximately five more minutes. So I wanted to ask you if you could install one idea or practice into undergraduates or recent graduates that would amplify their fulfillment or their impact at work, what would it be?
Wow. I'm going to try doing like a magic trick here and try to integrate my answer to that with this last question. Can you share in terms of strategy or mental fortification for fulfill? There's a question here around creating full-time remote work or even part-time remote work with a working partner and kids at home. So that speaks to me quite substantially because I am married with 2 kids. I am an evangelist for routines and habits, which is not something you would have heard me say during my student years at Smith or even my first graduate program. I was all about like, woo, let's figure it out, like be free, follow my instincts. It does not suit my nature to be disciplined, but I have learned that is the pathway to getting through a day, a week, a month, a year, and to keeping yourself on track. So when your question, Patty, was around installing a mindset or something like that, right? To fulfill your or to understand your fulfillment at work, how good you feel about work. And I think it's both the practical and the sublime, right? Having a schedule that allows you to put in the pieces of your day that matter to you, whether it's exercise or reflection or time with your loved ones or Netflix, whatever matters to you, is really critical. And I would add to that routine and habit a process of asking yourself these key questions, not incessantly, but quarterly. I think you need to have a quarterly meeting with yourself, the same way you will when you go to the world of work, there will be somebody, a manager, who will be open to you leading because you own your career, a sequence of conversations, probably quarterly, like what am I looking for? What am I striving for? How am I doing? What could I be doing more of? What should I be doing less of? You need to have that meeting with yourself first. And you need to be asking yourself quarterly, like, wait a second. When I think about my dreams, when I think about my values, when I think about what moves me, what I can't stop thinking about, what I want for my life, how close am I? Am I moving in the right direction? That is the thing I would say, Patty, they have to install is like this habit of taking ownership of your career and your life early. I wish I had done that in my 20s. I didn't come across this whole concept until pretty after I had kids and I was drowning in work and drowning in children and just freaking out all the time.
Because you just go on autopilot for like.
You go on autopilot.
Where did the last 10 years go? And I'm in a career that I don't like, right?
Oh, I have that conversation. That's why I have a business. I have a business because people are on autopilot. Because people are like, suddenly I'm 35, I'm 40, I'm 45, I'm 60, and I don't know what I'm doing with myself. I can't account for myself. And I don't want that for you. No, don't do that. Make deliberate choices. And then if you have to pivot. Like don't ever think I've already put 10 years into this industry. I can't backtrack. That would be such a waste. I mean, those are lies that our inner critic tells ourselves. Don't believe that, but put habits in place. So daily and weekly, just to get through the week and to make sure that daily is tough. I like to say, like, at the end of a week, have I done something good for myself? Have I exercised? Have I made a couple meals at home that were good? I mean, not now, because now all I do is make meals, but in real life, did I spend time with my husband? Did we get outside? Did we see friends? Week by week, have I structured things? And then quarter by quarter, if I think about how much time, here's something I say all the time, we're going to spend 90,000 hours of our lives at work. More time at work than we will do anything else other than sleep. Make it purposeful. Choose. Be intentional and assess. And if it's not working for you, get out of it, figure something else out. Laura, you had a question.
I do have a question. It's very specific. So when you talk about making work for yourself, right now I'm trying to write a personal human interest story for the paper. I came across this great story where people are helping other people, through the COVID experience. So even if that doesn't get published, how can I use all that work that I'm now putting into this paper, this article, sorry, how can I use that to promote myself as a writer?
Put it on Medium, put it in your LinkedIn profile. Like if you look, it's funny because listen, I'm a career and leadership coach, right? But even 2 weeks ago, I was on the phone with somebody trying to hire someone for a coaching project I have. And she was like, you don't have enough content in your LinkedIn profile under your business that says what you actually, like projects that you've done. And I was like, like keep looking at what other people are doing. Look at profiles that are inspiring to you and notice what they're doing on their profiles. But publish it yourself, put it on LinkedIn, put it in your portfolio. Like when you think about your resume is just an asset that reflects what you think is important. Put it in your resume, tell your friends, put it in a newsletter, publish your own website. Like that, again, making work is not always for public consumption. Right? Making work is a principle of training yourself to give yourself assignments, design a course of study, be disciplined about achieving things, learning new things, practicing. In your case, publish it yourself. Don't wait for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We're at 1:00.
I'm like so inspired and I'm like, can we talk every week? This would be great. Thanks, Nayla.
My pleasure.
So helpful. And I can't thank you enough for your time.
You're welcome. Yeah,
this was awesome. Thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm so happy to do it. I just love Smith. Like I think you guys are positioned to do amazing work in the world. I'm not kidding. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram with my professional site. I have a podcast. Like just connect. Like let me know what's on your mind. Remind me how we met. But let's talk.
So your website.
NaylaBahri.com.
And that will be how we follow you on Instagram.
You can find everything on NaylaBahri.com.
Oh, Nayla. Okay. And then if we want to hear more from you, we can listen to your podcast.
Correct. Which you can link through on I have a newsletter, which it's not obnoxious. It's just 5 times a year. All that stuff. Just go to NaylaBahri.com and you'll find everything there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nayla.
You guys are listen, you're going to be great. And I'm going to help you get there. All right. So just take care of yourselves. Be safe, be healthy. Congratulations. Whether you're graduating or not, congratulations.